My name is Daniel Kessler. I'm 39. I raise my daughter Nora alone, and 4 nights a week I drive a medical courier route that ends at 5 in the morning, so I can stand at the school door at 3 in the afternoon when she comes out. At parent night, my ex-wife didn't see me. I was behind the coat rack. She said what she said, and I heard all of it. I didn't correct her. I signed the volunteer sheet, and I set out the paper cups. She was talking to 3 other mothers by the book fair table. Glossy, easy, sure of herself. That's Nora's dad, she told them. He's just a single dad driving nights. You know how it is. The 3 of them laughed. The principal was standing 10 feet away. And here's what Whitney didn't know. What nobody in that gym knew except the principal. That school was supposed to be closed by then. Consolidated, gone by January 31st. And I know the exact figure that kept the lights on. Because I wrote the check. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have looked closer, this story is for you. Before I go on, do me one favor. Hit subscribe so this finds the next person who needs it. And comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. Now let me take you back, and I'll tell it slow, from the beginning. I want you to understand the shift first, because the shift is the whole thing. It's the word she used like a leash. Meridian Medical Logistics. That's who I drive for. It's not glamorous. I move specimen coolers between hospitals in the dark, blood draws, tissue samples, things that have to be somewhere before a lab opens at dawn. My route runs from the west side of Grand Rapids out to the county hospitals and back. I clock in at 9 at night. I clock out at 5 in the morning. The city is empty at that hour. Just me, the cooler strapped in the back, and the radio turned low so it doesn't put me to sleep. I chose those hours on purpose. People think a schedule like that gets handed to you, like a punishment. Mine I picked, because when I clock out at 5, I'm home by 5:40. I sleep in pieces. I'm up at 6:15. And at 6:30 I'm flipping pancakes for a 9-year-old who likes them a little burnt at the edges, which I will never understand, but I make them that way anyway. I walk her the 4 blocks to Fenwick Elementary, and every afternoon at 3, I'm at that door. Rain, snow, all of it. I'm the dad standing at the door. It costs me things. I won't pretend it doesn't. I don't have friends the way other men my age do. There's no beer on a Friday, no fishing trips, no group of guys who text about the game. I'm asleep when the world does its socializing. I'm awake when the world is dark and quiet, and asking nothing of me. That's the trade. I made it with both eyes open, Nora or the rest of it. And it was never a hard choice. It only looks hard from the outside. She's thriving, is the thing. Nora, she's in 3rd grade, and she loves it there. Fenwick is the neighborhood school, the one she can walk to, the one where the crossing guard knows her name and the librarian saves her the horse books. She has a best friend named Priya and a reading log full of stars. She is, by every measure that matters to me, a happy kid. And a happy kid is worth every hour of sleep I've given up. So that's the man Whitney was describing. I want you to hold that picture, because she was about to describe him wrong, and she was about to do it out loud. That night, parent night, I signed the volunteer sheet the way I always do. And when I did, my keys were on the table next to my hand. On that ring is a brass key, old one, worn so smooth on the edges you can barely feel the teeth anymore. It was my father's. It opened the front door of his machine shop for 41 years, and I've carried it every day since he passed. It's a key to a building that doesn't exist anymore. I'll come back to that. Just remember the key. It matters more than it looks. Now, before Whitney ever opened her mouth by the book fair, something else happened at that door. Small thing. You'd have missed it if you weren't the one it happened to. The principal, Miriam Vance, was greeting parents as they came into the gym. Handshake, nod, so glad you could make it, the whole routine. She's good at it. She's been at Fenwick a long time. And when I came through the door, she took my hand, and she held it a half second too long. She looked at me a beat longer than she looked at anyone else. And she said, "We're glad you're here, Daniel." quiet, weighted, like the words had something heavy inside them. Nobody else got that. The other parents got so glad you could make it. I got my first name, and I got that look. I gave her a small nod, and I moved on. Because I didn't want it, but I felt it. She's the only person in that whole building who knows why she says my name like that. And she can't say the rest. She's not allowed to. That's the deal we made. Let me take you further back now, to why she can't. My father was Walt Kessler. He ran Kessler Tool and Die on the west side of the city for 41 years. A small machine shop, lathes, mills, a surface grinder older than me, the smell of cutting oil that got into everything and never left. He made parts for people who made bigger things, brackets, fittings, one-off jobs nobody else would take. He worked 6 days a week his whole life, and he never once called it a hardship. He called it the shop, like it was a person. He died last fall, October, quiet, in his sleep, which is more than most men get. And that autumn I spent every spare hour I had cleaning out that shop, sweeping 41 years of metal shavings off a concrete floor, deciding what to do with a building and a business and a man's whole life's work. I thought about keeping it. For about a week, I let myself think about it, running the shop the way he did. But I did the math on it, and the math was cruel. To run that place right, I'd have had to be there at 7 in the morning and stay till 6 at night, and that's the exact stretch of the day that belongs to Nora. The pancakes, the walk, the door at 3. I couldn't have both, and a man who's already got one parent gone can't hand his kid a father who's never home either. So I sold it. West Michigan is full of shops like that right now, little ones. The owners all retiring or dying, and a bigger outfit bought the building and the equipment together. It wasn't a fortune, but it wasn't nothing. And I took the check from that sale, and I put it in an account, and honestly, for a while, I didn't know what it was for. It just sat there. My father's whole life turned into a number, waiting, then January came. And January is where this story turns. In January, a letter went home in every kid's backpack at Fenwick, Kent Ridge School District, official letterhead. It said the district was facing a budget shortfall, and it said Fenwick Elementary was on a list. The word they used was consolidate. Fenwick would close, and the kids would be bused across town to Ridgeview, a bigger building, a longer day, a stranger's neighborhood. The vote was set for January 31st. For most families, that letter was bad news. For us, it was the ground coming out from under Nora's feet. Her walk to school, gone. Priya, in a different bus zone, maybe gone. The crossing guard who knew her name, the librarian with the horse books, all of it, gone. She'd be a small kid on a big bus, to a place that didn't know her. And I sat at my kitchen table at 5:30 in the morning, still in my courier jacket, and I read that letter 3 times. Then I went to the district's public budget documents, because they post them, and I read the number. To keep Fenwick open 1 more year, while the district restructured everything else, they needed to close a gap. $214,000. That was the whole. That was the whole difference between Nora walking to school and Nora on a bus at 6:50 in the morning. And I sat there, and I thought about the account, the one with my father's shop in it. And I want to tell you the exact figure, because the exact figure is the part I still can't get over. The shop sold for $228,000 net. I'd been carrying that check around for 3 months, not knowing what it was for. And now I knew. $214,000 to keep the school open. $228,000 in the account. My father, who never finished high school, who ran a machine shop with his hands, was about to keep a school open. He just wouldn't get his name on it. Neither would I. But I'm getting ahead. I didn't tell anyone. Not Nora. I didn't want a 9-year-old carrying that. Not Whitney. God knows. I called the district first, and they told me a private gift couldn't just be handed to a school like a casserole. It had to go through channels. So they pointed me to the Kentwater Education Foundation. That's the nonprofit that handles gifts for schools in the area. And that's where I met a man named Paul Ostrander. Paul's the director there. Careful man. Glasses. The kind who reads every line of a document twice. I sat across his desk in the middle of January, and I told him what I wanted to do. He didn't blink at the number, which I appreciated. He told me a gift routed through the foundation could bridge the gap before the January 31st vote, as long as the funds were certified and in place by January 24th. That gave the board a real number to point at. That turned Fenwick from a school on a list into a school with its next year already paid for. And then he asked me how I wanted to be recognized. Donor wall, he said. Press release, a little ceremony maybe. The district loves those. And I told him no. I told him I wanted one condition. And the condition was the whole point. Anonymous, I said. Nobody knows. Not the school. Not the parents. The principal has to countersign, I understand that. But past her, nobody. He looked at me for a second the way people do when they're deciding if you're a fool or something else. Then he nodded, and he pulled the anonymous donor paperwork, and we did it. I wrote a certified check for $214,000 in memory of Walter Kessler, and I gave it to a foundation to give to a school, and I asked the whole world not to know. Miriam Vance countersigned it 3 days later. That's why she says my name the way she does. On January 31st, the board voted. Fenwick stayed open. There was a little article in the paper about a generous anonymous gift that helped close the gap. And for about 2 days, the parents buzzed about it, and then everybody went back to their lives. Nora kept her walk, kept Priya, kept the librarian and the horse books. And she never knew why. That was the plan. That was the whole plan. Which brings me back to the gym, to parent night, to the book fair table, and to the 4 words that started all of this. I was refilling the cups. That was my volunteer job that night, the drinks table, which is the job they give the dad they don't quite know what to do with. I'd step behind the coat rack to grab another sleeve of paper cups from the supply box, and that's where I was standing, when Whitney came up to the book fair table with Brooke and Danielle and Steph. She didn't see me. The coat rack was between us. She had no idea I was 4 feet away with my hands full of cups. I want to describe her for you, because it matters. Whitney landed on her feet after our divorce, and she never lets anyone forget it. She remarried a man named Aaron Cross into a nice house on the good side of Ada. She dresses for these school nights like they're something more than school nights. And she has a way of talking about me to other mothers that sounds like kindness and lands like a knife. That night she was in her element, warm, glossy, generous with her pity. Steph asked her, nodding my direction across the gym, "Is that Nora's dad over there?" And Whitney said it. She said, "That's him. He's just a single dad driving nights, you know how it is." And then, because the first cut wasn't quite deep enough, she softened it into something worse. He does his best. He really does. It's just, you can only do so much on a schedule like that. And she smiled. And the 3 of them made those small sounds women make when they've been handed permission to feel sorry for someone. Just a single dad driving nights. She named the shift I work. And she thought she had named the man. That's the part I keep coming back to. She took the one fact she had, the hours, the courier route, the 5 a.m. clock out, and she built a whole ceiling out of it and hung it over my head. She measured me with the one instrument she had, and the instrument was wrong, and she never once thought to ask if it was. And here's what I was standing on while she said it. I mean that literally. The gym floor under her feet, the lights over her head, the doors that opened that night, all of it was open because of the check in my father's name. She was standing inside my gift, 10 feet from the principal who knew, telling 3 women I was a man who could only do so much. And I was 4 feet away, holding a sleeve of paper cups, listening. I could have stepped out from behind that coat rack. I've replayed it 100 times. I could have walked over and said, calmly, actually. I could have watched her face do the math right there. Part of me wanted it so badly, my hands shook a little. But Nora was across the gym. She was at the craft table with Priya, gluing cotton balls onto a paper sheep, happy as anything, and I did the math the way I always do the math. A scene in front of my daughter in front of her friends costs Nora something. It makes her the kid whose parents made a thing at parent night. It follows her. My pride heals. Her third grade year doesn't get a do-over. So I stayed behind the coat rack. I let it pass over me. I set the cups out, and I filled the pitcher, and I went back to being the drinks table dad. That's not weakness. I need you to know that. I've heard people call it that. It's the most expensive thing I own, that restraint. It cost me more than the check did. But Whitney wasn't finished for the night. Nobody's ever just finished. Later, out in the parking lot, we crossed paths at my truck. Nora was buckling into the back seat, and Whitney came over, all warmth, and she put her hand on my arm like an old friend. And she said, "You know, Dan, Aaron and I have been talking. We really should think about getting Nora into a better district. A stronger school. She's a bright girl. She deserves the best, don't you think? A better district. A stronger school." She said it standing in the Fenwick parking lot, 10 feet from the front doors I paid to keep open, and she wanted to move my daughter out of the school my father's shop had saved. And she said it kindly. That's the thing about Whitney. She always says it kindly. She'd already decided Fenwick was a place you escape from, not a place worth fighting for. And it never crossed her mind that somebody had fought for it, that somebody was standing right there. I said, "Nora's happy where she is." And I got in the truck. That's all I gave her. Nora waved at her mother through the window, and I pulled out of the lot, and I drove my kid home and made her a snack and did not say one single word about any of it. Because that's the job. The job is to hold it. Now, you might be asking the fair question, the one I asked myself 100 times on the night route, alone with the coolers and the empty highway. Why keep it a secret at all? If it's yours, if it's true, if it would shut her up in one sentence, why carry it? Why not just say it? And I'll tell you the honest answer. Not the pretty one, the honest one, because you've come this far with me, and you deserve it straight. It wasn't humility. I'd love to tell you it was some noble, quiet thing that I gave without needing credit because I'm just built better than that. That's not true. And I won't sell it to you. There were 2 reasons, and both of them are a little ugly, and I've made peace with that. The first reason was Nora. If it got out that her dad bought the school, she becomes the kid whose dad bought the school. You know exactly what that is in a lunchroom. It's a target. It's your dad thinks he can buy everything. It's teachers treating her different. Some soft, some hard, all of it strange. It's a 9-year-old carrying a $200,000 sentence she never asked for. I would rather be pitied by every mother in that gym than make my daughter carry that. That one I'll defend to anybody. The second reason is the ugly one. Whitney. If Whitney knew I'd written a check like that, she'd have turned it into a weapon inside a week, not gratitude. Ammunition? I could hear the exact shape of it. Look at him. He'll throw $200,000 at a school, but he can't be flexible on the custody schedule. He'll spend on a building, but not on his own daughter's future. She'd have marched it into a lawyer's office and called it evidence. There's a parenting time order in a drawer in my house, and I have spent 9 years keeping our arrangement calm and boring and out of court, and I was not about to hand her a fresh grenade. A man who throws money is easier to attack than a man who shows up at 3. So I stayed the man who shows up at 3, and I let the money disappear into a foundation's paperwork. Ugly, both of them, but true. And I'd make the same call again tomorrow. I thought that was the end of it. I thought the check was written, the school was saved, the secret was sealed behind Paul Ostrander's paperwork and Miriam Vance's signature. And I could go back to my route and my pancakes and my door at 3 and let Whitney think whatever she needed to think to feel like she'd won. I was wrong. And I found out how wrong in February, back in Paul Ostrander's office. He'd called me in, said there was something I needed to hear in person. And I sat across that same desk, and Paul took his glasses off, which I would learn is the thing he does when the news is complicated. The gift is airtight, he said. The anonymity agreement is real, it's legal, and under normal circumstances no one would ever know. I want you to hear that part first. But, I said. But, he said, the district's applying for a state matching grant in March. It's called Building Bright Futures. If they qualify, the state matches a big chunk of the district's stability fund. It's a lot of money, Daniel. It could put Fenwick on solid ground for years, not just one more year. It changes everything for the school. That sounds good, I said. Where's the trouble? He put his glasses back on. State grant rules. To qualify, the district has to disclose every supplemental funding source over $50,000 in the public record, by name, for accountability. Your gift is $214,000. It's the single largest supplemental source they have this year. He let that sit. If they disclose it, they almost certainly get the match, and the school is secure for a long time. If they don't disclose it, to protect your anonymity, they don't qualify. The grant walks, and the school's right back on a list next year. There it was, the trap, laid out clean on a February afternoon. My whole plan, the coat rack, the swallowed pride, the two ugly honest reasons, all of it depended on nobody ever knowing. And now the truth wanted out. Not because of my ego, not because I wanted to win a fight in a parking lot, because a state grant with a rule book needed a name on a line, and mine was the only name that fit. The truth wanted out for reasons that had nothing to do with me at all, and it was sitting in a folder on Paul's desk, and I was the only person who could decide whether to let it. I didn't sign anything that day. I told Paul I needed to think, and I drove home, and I thought, and while I was thinking, the world kept turning without asking me. Because a few days later, a mom I actually like, a woman named Renee, whose son is in Nora's class, forwarded me a screenshot. She meant well. She thought I should see it. It was from a pedo group text, one I'm not on, and it was Whitney. In writing this time. Poor guy does his best, she'd typed. Night shift and all. You just feel for Nora, you know? He loves her, he's just not really in a position to give her much. And a little sad face. And then another mom had answered, "Aw, that's so sad," and Whitney had written back, "I try not to judge. We all do what we can with what we've got." I'll tell you something. In the gym, spoken, her pity had a kind of heat to it. Fast, careless, gone in a second. But in text, in cold gray letters on my phone at midnight, in the cab of a truck full of specimen coolers, it was worse. It didn't fade. It just sat there in the screen. Time-stamped, permanent, not really in a position to give her much. That's what she wrote. In February, 3 weeks after I'd given a school $214,000 so her daughter could keep her walk. And the whole time, the truth was sitting in a folder on Paul's desk, and I was the only one who could let it out. So here's where I stood. I could stay hidden and watch the grant walk, and the school go right back on the list next year, and protect a secret that only protected my pride now, since the two real reasons were already fading. Or I could let the truth into the record, lose the anonymity I'd paid for with a swallowed scene at parent night, and give Fenwick years of solid ground. Give Nora a school that's still there when she's in 5th grade. 6th, whenever. I want you to understand what I chose, and how I chose it, because it's the hinge of everything that comes after. I didn't call Whitney. I didn't type out the truth and hit send and watch it land, as much as one small mean part of me wanted exactly that. I didn't tell Nora. I didn't march into that gym and step out from behind the coat rack and finally say, actually. I drove to Paul Ostrander's office on a Tuesday, and I signed the state grant supplemental funding disclosure form. My hand, my pen, one signature. And that signature meant that when the board read the grant paperwork into the public record in March, My name would be in it. On a date I didn't control. In a room I might not even be standing in. I signed the one piece of paper that guaranteed the truth would surface without me ever saying a word of it out loud. She had described the job that lets me be her father. And she thought she was describing my ceiling. And I decided, sitting in that office with the pen still in my hand, that I wasn't going to argue with her. I wasn't going to correct her in a gym or a parking lot or a group text. I was going to let a room full of public record do it for me. In March, out loud, on a night I'd probably be somewhere out on the highway with the coolers strapped in the back. Paul took the form. He looked at it then at me and he said, "You understand what this does. Once this is in the minutes, it's public. Forever. There's no taking it back." "I understand," I said. What neither of us knew yet, what I wouldn't find out until the meeting was already on the public calendar, was who was going to be sitting in that boardroom in March when my name got read aloud. Whose committee seat put him 10 feet from the treasurer? Whose phone was going to photograph the screen? And which one text, to which one person, was going to travel from that room straight into Whitney's hands? I signed my name and I drove home to make pancakes. I had no idea the collision I just scheduled. The date came out on a Tuesday afternoon. March 18th. Kent Ridge School District. Regular board meeting, 7 o'clock, in the multi-purpose room at the district office off Plainfield. I saw it on the public calendar the same way anyone could have seen it. I wasn't looking for it. I was looking for the spring break schedule so I could figure out which nights I'd need a sitter. And there it was. 3 lines down. Regular meeting. Agenda to follow. Open to the public. I sat with that for a while. I want to tell you I felt brave. I didn't. I felt the way you feel at the top of a ladder when you realize you've climbed higher than you meant to, and the only way down is through the thing you came up here to do. Then Paul Ostrander called me, and he told me the part I hadn't put together yet. "Daniel," he said, "I want you to hear this from me before the agenda goes out. The disclosure's going to be read into the record on the 18th. Ron Feld reads the supplemental funding. He's the treasurer. That's how it's done." "Okay," I said. "There's something else." He paused, and I could hear him choosing the words. "The Facilities Committee sits in on the budget items. It's a standing thing. And I believe Aaron Cross is on that committee this term." I didn't say anything. "You know that name," Paul said. It wasn't a question. "He's my daughter's stepfather," I said. The line was quiet for a second. Somewhere on his end a door closed. "I'm sorry," Paul said. "I didn't set it up this way. Nobody did. It's just the calendar and the rules and who happens to be sitting where." "I know," I said. "It's fine. It wasn't fine. But it was mine now. I'd signed the form. I'd handed him the pen. And the whole point of what I'd done was that I wouldn't have to be the one in the room saying it out loud. So of course the room would have somebody in it who knew my name. Somebody 10 feet from the treasurer. Somebody whose phone would come out of his pocket the second the number landed. I made 2 decisions that afternoon, standing in my kitchen with the phone still warm against my ear. The first was that I would not go to that meeting. Not because I was scared, though I was. Because I'd built this whole thing to be a piece of paper that spoke without me. If I showed up, if I stood in the back with my arms crossed and watched Whitney's husband do the math, then I was back in the gym again. I was the man stepping out from behind the coat rack to say actually. And I'd already decided I wasn't going to be that man. I was going to let the minutes be that man. The second decision was that I would not tell Whitney. Not a text, not a heads up, not a single word to soften the landing. She'd had a whole autumn and winter to look closer, and she'd chosen the easy read every time. She could find out the way the public record finds anybody out. Cold, in writing. On a night I'd be out on the highway, with the coolers strapped in the back. So I didn't tell her. And the calendar didn't move. And March came. In the 2 weeks before the meeting, the small things started happening. The near misses. The kind of thing where you can feel the truth pressing against the walls of the room, looking for the seam. Renee told me a tow mom had cornered Miriam in the office, wanted to know who the anonymous donor was. Everybody knew there'd been a gift by then. The grant announcement had gone out, and grant announcements are noisy things. Somebody kept a school open, and the whole West Side wanted a name to thank. Miriam held the line, said what she'd agreed to say, that the donor had asked for privacy and the district was honoring it. And the mom pushed, and Miriam smiled. And that was the end of it. But I heard about it. The pressure was building against the glass. Then there was the thing with Aaron. Nora told me about it, without knowing she was telling me anything. She was at their house that weekend, and she came back Sunday night with her backpack and a loose tooth and a story. She said Aaron and her mom had been talking at dinner about the school. She said Aaron told her mom that some rich person gave the school a whole lot of money in January, so it wouldn't have to close. She said her mom said, well, good for them, whoever they are. And then they talked about something else. I flipped the pancakes and I said, that's nice of them, whoever they are. Yeah, Nora said, and she wiggled the tooth, and that was the whole conversation. Some private gift saved Fenwick in January. That's all it was to them. A nice thing a rich person did. Whitney sat at her own dinner table, in the affluent house in Ada, and heard the exact outline of what I'd done. The month and the school and the amount that was more than round, and she didn't connect a single wire of it to the man who drove nights. Why would she? In her map of the world, the man who drove nights didn't have $214,000. That was the whole architecture of her mistake. She'd sorted me into a drawer, and the drawer she'd put me in didn't have that kind of money in it, so the money had to belong to somebody else. Somebody rich, somebody whoever they are. And then she did the last thing. The thing she'll think about for a long time, I'd guess. Renee told me this one too. There was a new mother at pickup that week. New to the school, kid just transferred in. And Whitney, being warm and glossy and helpful, walked her through the landscape. Who's who? Whose kid does what? And she got to me, standing over by the fence where I always stand, and she said it. One more time. Oh, that's Nora's dad. He's a single dad. Drives nights, you know how it is. He does his best. The last time she ever said it, not knowing. She had no idea it was the last time. That's the part that stays with me. She said it the way you'd say anything you've said 100 times. Easy, automatic, already looking at the next thing. She spent the sentence like loose change. And the whole time, the 18th was sitting on the public calendar, 4 days out, with my name already typed into a document, waiting to be read aloud. She named the shift I work. One more time, and thought she'd named the man. The 18th came. I want to be honest about where I was, because it matters to me. I was on the route, 4 nights a week, and the 18th was one of them. I had the sitter for Nora, a college girl 2 doors down who does her homework at my kitchen table. And I clocked in at Meridian at 9, and I ran the loop I always run. Butterworth to the reference lab. The reference lab to the campus on the southeast side. Specimen coolers in the back, strapped down, the little vials of somebody's blood work riding along in the dark while I drove. At 7 o'clock, when the board gabbled in, I was somewhere on the East Beltline with the radio low. I wasn't thinking about it every minute. That's a thing nobody tells you. You can schedule the most important collision of your life and then find yourself thinking about whether you need gas. But underneath the gas and the radio and the mile markers, I knew. Somewhere in a fluorescent room off Plainfield, they were working down an agenda toward a line item, and when they got to it, my father's whole life was going to be read out loud to a room full of strangers and one man who knew exactly who I was. Here's what happened in that room. I've put it together since. From Paul, from the minutes, from the one person who told me what Aaron's face did. They got through the routine business. Approval of prior minutes. A transportation contract. Somebody talked too long about a crossing guard. And then, Ron Feld, the treasurer, A heavy man with reading glasses he keeps on a cord pulled the budget packet toward him and started in on supplemental funding. This is the driest part of any meeting. It's the part where people check their phones and think about going home. He read a line about a technology grant. He read a line about a food service reimbursement. And then he got to the one that mattered, and he read it the same flat way he'd read the other two, because to him, it was just another line. Supplemental funding, he said. Fenwick Elementary, continuity. Routed through the Kentwater Education Foundation. $214,000, certified January 24th, ahead of the consolidation vote. He turned the page, and per the state disclosure requirement for the Building Bright Futures match, the named source of record. He found the line. Donor of record, Daniel W. Kessler, in memory of Walter Kessler. And then he kept going. He read the next line item. Because that's the job. The name that had been a secret for 2 months. The name my ex-wife had turned into a punchline 4 separate times. Went into the permanent record of Kent Ridge School District between a food service reimbursement and whatever came after it. And the man reading it didn't even look up. But somebody looked up. Aaron Cross was sitting where the Facilities Committee sits, along the side, and when Ron Feld said in memory of Walter Kessler, Aaron's head came up off the packet he'd been half reading. I've thought about this a lot, what that half second must have been. He knows the name Kessler. It's his stepdaughter's last name. It's the name of the man his wife calls a single dad who drives nights. And here it is, attached to $214,000, attached to a dead father in a shop, attached to the entire reason the school his committee oversees still has its lights on. He did the math nobody asked him to do. You could see it, the person who told me said. You could watch it move across his face. He didn't gasp. He didn't say anything. He was a man on a committee in a public meeting, and he had just been handed a private grenade with the pin already out, and there was nothing to do with it but hold it. So he took out his phone, and he photographed the screen at the front of the room where the disclosure was projected. The number, the date, the name, in memory of Walter Kessler. He held his phone up like anybody taking a picture of a slide, and nobody thought a thing of it, and he sat back down. That photograph is the one that reached Whitney. Not a call. Not a careful conversation. A photograph of a projector screen sent from a folding chair in a district meeting room from a husband to a wife with probably no words at all. Just the picture. Just the record. The truth traveled the last mile the same cold way it had traveled every other mile. In writing. Without me. I found out the meeting had happened the way I found out about the date. Later, on my own, from a distance. I finished the route at 5, the way I always do. I drove home in the gray. I let the sitter go and I paid her, and I stood in the kitchen, and I made the batter. And at 6:30 Nora came down with her hair in a nest, and I flipped the pancakes, and neither of us knew yet that anything in the world had shifted. It was the most ordinary morning. It's the morning I remember best. Whitney read it that night. This part I know less about, and I'll only tell you what I'm sure of, and one thing I let myself imagine. What I'm sure of. Aaron sent her the photograph. The minutes went public within a day, the way public minutes do, posted as a PDF on the district site. And somebody from the TOE found them, because somebody always does, and posted the board summary to the parent group. The same parent group where Whitney's screenshot had once lived. The same feed. So that by the end of that week, in the same scroll, you could find the line "He's just a single dad." Drives nights sitting a few inches from the line $214,000 that kept the school open. Nobody had to say anything. The feed did it. The two sentences just sat there next to each other. And everybody who scrolled past did the same arithmetic Aaron had done in his folding chair. Here's the part I let myself imagine, because I think it's true even though I wasn't there. Whitney, alone in the kitchen in Ada. The good kitchen, the one with the island. Phone in her hand. The public PDF open. Because she'd have opened it, she'd have needed to see the actual document and not just Aaron's photograph of a screen. And she'd have read it herself. Daniel W. Kessler, in memory of Walter Kessler. Walter, whom she'd known. Walter, whom she'd once, at a Thanksgiving years ago, called the shop guy when she was explaining my family to somebody. The shop guy's whole shop folded up and turned into the reason her daughter still had a school to walk to. And then, I imagine, she scrolled back. Not the document, her own messages. Because that's what you do. You go back through your own record when the ground moves, and you reread yourself with the new information, and the words don't change, but everything under them does. She scrolled back through the group text. He does his best, poor guy. Night shift and all. Every one of them time-stamped. And here's the thing the dates did to her. Every joke she'd sent was inside the same month, or the month right after, that I'd been carrying a certified check for more than the price of most of the houses on her street. She had a whole month of jokes to reread, and the dates didn't move for her. They just sat there, being what they were. No one to perform for in that kitchen. That's the part I think about. Every mean thing she ever said about me, she said to an audience. To the three mothers at the book fair. To the parking lot. To the group text. To the new mom at the fence. She never once said it alone. And now, for the first time, she had the whole story. And there was nobody in the room to laugh, and nobody to nod, and nobody to smooth it into pity with. Just her and a PDF and a month of her own words. I didn't do that to her. I want to be clear about that. For you and for me. I signed a form. The rules did the rest. But I won't pretend I didn't know. I knew when I signed it that the paper would speak. I just let it speak in its own dry voice, on its own night, in its own room, instead of mine. The reactions came in over the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to give you each one, because each one landed differently, and I don't want to blur them together. Miriam first. It was a drop-off morning, 3 or 4 days after the minutes went up. I walked Nora to the door the way I always do, and Miriam was standing there in her cardigan the way she always is, and Nora ran ahead to find Priya, and it was just the two of us for a second, in the noise of the morning. She didn't make a speech. She's not that kind of woman, and I love her for it. She just looked at me, and something in her face let go. Some tightness she'd been carrying since October. I stood 10 feet from you in that gym, she said. Quiet. Just for me. And I couldn't say a word. You have no idea what that cost me. Standing there. She stopped. Started again. I'm saying it now. Thank you, Daniel, that was all. She squeezed my arm once and turned back to the doors and told a running kid to walk. Please walk. And I stood there in the drop-off line with my throat tight. Because she was the only one who'd known the whole time. The only qualified witness. And she'd carried it silently through every one of Whitney's jokes, because I'd asked her to. 2 months of biting her tongue, released in one sentence at a door. Then the mothers, one at a time, over that same stretch of days. This is the part I'd braced for, and the part that surprised me most. Because there was no satisfaction in it. There's a version of this story where I enjoyed this part. That version isn't true. Brooke wouldn't meet my eye. At pickup, she'd been friendly enough all year, the distant friendly of parents who don't really know each other, and now she looked at the ground when I came near, or she found something urgent to do with her keys. She'd laughed at the book fair. She was remembering that she'd laughed. And her not being able to look at me was its own small punishment that I hadn't asked for and didn't want. Danielle went the other way. Danielle overcorrected into a warmth that was almost painful to watch. Suddenly she was saving me a spot at the fence, asking how Nora liked 3rd grade, telling me her own kid had mentioned Nora at dinner. Trying, in the only currency she had, to buy back a laugh she couldn't take back. I let her. What else do you do? You let people repair themselves on you when the alternative is making them bleed. And Steph, who'd been the one to point me out across the gym that first night, Steph actually tried to open the subject. She caught me by the doors one afternoon, and she started in, "Daniel, I just want to say, I had no idea. I feel terrible about." And I stopped her. Gently, I didn't want it. "It's Nora's school," I said. "That's the only part that matters." And I meant it, and she could tell I meant it, and she let it go, and we never spoke of it again. I want you to notice something about those three. I didn't humiliate a single one of them back. I had every card to do it with. I could have said something at that fence that would have followed Brooke around for years. I didn't, and I've thought about why, and I think it's this. The fall was already complete. It had completed itself the moment the minutes were read. Me piling on would only have taken the story away from the record and given it back to me, made it small and personal and mean. The record was clean. I wanted to leave it clean. And then, finally, Whitney, she came to me at the edge of the parking lot. Of course she did. And of course it was that parking lot. The same asphalt where she'd stood in the fall and told me we should really think about getting Nora into a better district. Standing on the ground my check had kept. It was a Thursday, late in the day. Nora was already buckled in the back with her folder of drawings, and Whitney crossed the lot toward me. And I could see it in the way she walked that she'd rehearsed something. She had the whole thing loaded. The explanation, the apology, the reframe, where somehow by the end of it, we'd have arrived at a version she could live inside. She's good at that. She'd talked her way into and out of our whole marriage that way. She got about 6 feet from me and she started. "Dan, I've been wanting to talk to you." I didn't know. There's no way I could have known. And I feel. And I want to tell you I stood there and let her finish. I didn't. Not out of cruelty. Out of the opposite. Because I knew where that sentence was going. It was going to become a scene. A scene in a parking lot, with our daughter 10 feet away in the back seat watching her parents' mouths move through the windshield. And a scene in front of Nora cost more than anything Whitney could say to me was worth. So I didn't give her the scene. That's the confrontation this whole thing was built toward, and I withheld it, on purpose, standing right there where she'd earned it. I didn't rank her back. I didn't read her the 4 times she'd said it. I didn't hand her the arithmetic of the dates. I said one thing. The one thing in me that wasn't a weapon. I didn't do it so you'd know, I said. I did it so Nora'd have somewhere to walk to. And I got in the truck, and I drove my daughter home. I watched Whitney in the mirror for 1 second as I pulled out. Standing alone on the asphalt. No mothers around her this time. No audience. Just her, in the middle of the lot, holding a speech she didn't get to give. In a parking lot that only existed for her to stand in because of the man who'd just driven away. That's the whole of it. That's what a signature did. Let me tell you about a Friday a few months later, because that's where I want to leave you, and it's the truest part. It was a Friday, with no route. Those are the good ones. Whole nights where I don't have to hand my daughter to a sitter and drive off into the dark. We'd had dinner. It was that long light you get in early summer, the kind that makes 7 o'clock look like 5. And I had the windows down, and Nora was in the back seat, and we were coming home the long way, past the school. Fenwick's windows were lit gold in the low sun. Somebody was in there late. A custodian, probably, cleaning a building that was supposed to be closed by now. Consolidated, gone, and Nora, who'd heard something at school, the way kids always eventually hear something, leaned forward against her seatbelt. "Dad," she said, "did you really give the school all our money?" There it is. The one question. 9 years old, in the back seat, asking the needle straight. And I'll tell you what I said, and it isn't the true thing, and I'm at peace that it's the right thing. "No, baby," I said. "Grandpa did. It was his shop." Because that's true enough. Walt built that shop over 41 years. Every dollar of that check was made by his hands, on his machines, in his building, on the west side. I only carried it the last little way. And it's kind enough to keep Nora out of the crosshairs, so she never has to be the kid whose dad bought the school. Never has to carry that at a lunch table where kids are cruel. And it takes me out of the sentence entirely, which is the same thing I wanted from the beginning. Anonymity, not in the record anymore. But in my own daughter's memory of it, I reached over to the console and I picked up the brass key. My father's shop key, worn smooth from 41 years of a hand that wasn't mine. It'd been riding on my keyring this whole time, a key to a building that doesn't exist anymore. And I handed it back to her over the seat. "You keep that," I said. She turned it over in her small hands. "What does it open?" "Nothing anymore," I said. "But it used to open everything." She put it in her pocket. And she sat back. And she watched the school go by out her window. And then it was behind us. And she was already talking about something else. About Priya, and a game they'd made up. And the whole enormous thing had passed through her, and out the other side, and left her exactly the happy kid she was supposed to be. Which was the point. Which was always the entire point. So here's what I've got. Riding home in the long light with my father's key in my daughter's pocket. A schedule is not a station. Whitney looked at 4 nights a week and 5 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. And she thought she was looking at the size of a man. She was looking at the shape of his love. The most expensive thing I ever bought wasn't the school. It was being at that door at 3 o'clock. That cost me everything a machine shop was worth in sleep and friendships and the whole other life I might have had. And I'd buy it again. And there were 2 men I could have been, that whole time. There was the man who steps out from behind the coat rack in the gym. The one who says actually, out loud, in front of the mothers, and watches her face fall in real time, and takes the scene, and wins it. I felt him in me. One small mean part of me wanted to be him. And there was the man who signed a form on a Tuesday, and drove home to make pancakes, and let a room full of public records say it in March. On a night he'd be out on the highway with the coolers strapped in the back. I keep thinking the second man is the braver one. But I don't think that's right, actually. I think the second man was just the answer to her sentence, before she ever finished saying it. She called me just a single dad, driving nights, and the word doing all the damage was just. As if the nights were a ceiling. They were never a ceiling. They were how I paid for the door at 3. She'd been standing inside the proof the whole time and calling it small. So I'll leave you where I keep leaving myself. Tell me, would you have said it in the gym? Or would you have let March say it for you? And comment the city you're watching from. I still want to see how far this one travels.